Hello children all over the world, welcome to Story Time with Zada. Another exciting story, and this time the story is called Bubbles and Squeak. Can you guess what it's about? Well, just before you do, let's see what's inside Zada's dashik. Oh, this is something big today. Oh, how did that get in my dashik? Oh my goodness, let's take it out for you and I'll show you what it is. Just a minute. Oh, can you see it? That's funny. It's a special mirror. I wonder what that's got to do with our story. Do you want to know? Okay, let's get straight into it. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. As I said, this is a story called Bubbles and Squeak. And there you can see Squeak is a little mouse and Bubbles is a cute cat. Do you want to find out what happens? Okay, let's begin. Bubbles was a very, very cute cat, a young cat. And the thing he loved most was his beautiful collar and lovely dingy bell, which he wore around his neck. The only problem with Bubbles is what everybody saw as fear. You see, he was frightened of everybody and everything. Yes, he was frightened of children and people. He was frightened of dogs. And the worst thing of all, he was even frightened of mice. Can you imagine that? A cat frightened of mice? Well, you know, children, sometimes it's not so good to be so shy and quiet and timid and not stick up for yourself. Because there are those people out there, nasty people, sometimes we call them bullies, who don't take pity on us for that, but make fun. And that is exactly what happened. The dogs made fun of him. The cats made fun of him. And even the tiny mice made fun of him. And that made Bubbles very, very sad indeed. One day, Bubbles was feeling a little upset, but he went for a walk along the road. And he stopped outside a house, just as he was licking himself clean and looking at his lovely collar and dangly dingy bell. He heard. He looked around carefully, and there, very, very quickly, came trotting along the neighbourhood dog. Hello, Bubbles. Lovely collar, lovely bell. I think I'll have that, thank you very much. Woof! And within a jiffy, the dog had it round his neck. Yes, he had taken Bubbles' collar and bell. Well, Bubbles was very, very upset and started crying, "Give me back my bell! Give me back my collar!" Thanks very much, Bubbles. I think it looks very nice around my neck. Bubbles said, "You give me that back or..." And the dog looked at him and said, "Or you'll what?" Bubbles was very, 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 very upset. And the more he cried, the more the dog laughed at him. Well, with all this commotion outside, there was a little mouse called Squeak that lived in the house. And he popped out to see what was going on. Well, he couldn't bear it any longer. And Squeak called out to Bubbles, "What's all the commotion? I'm trying to get to sleep." Well, the dog ran off, and Bubbles the cat saw Squeak the mouse and said, "It's a mouse! It's a mouse!" "Oh, don't be silly," said Squeak. "I'm a mouse. Mice are supposed to be frightened of cats, not the other way round." "I know. That's the problem," said Bubbles. choking on his crying. He said, I'm frightened of everything and everybody. Well, Squeak took pity on Bubbles and said, just a minute, come into my house. Come on. Really? Said Bubbles. Come on, said Squeak. So Bubbles went into the house and met Squeak right near Squeak's mouse hole. Yeah, just down there. Can you see it? And they had a chat. Now tell me all about it, said Squeak. But stop crying. Okay, sniffed Bubbles. You see, the problem is I'm frightened of everyone and everything. The mouse said, really? Yes. What do you mean? Said Squeak. Well, he said, I'm frightened of dogs. I'm frightened of cats. Don't start crying, said Squeak. Sorry, said Bubbles. And the worst thing, he looked around. I'm even scared of mice. Oh, that is bad, said Squeak. A cat frightened of mice. And then Bubbles said, but that's not the worst of it. Squeak said, tell me, what's the matter? Well, Bubbles said, the worst thing is the big, nasty neighbourhood dog just came along and took my collar and bell. Squeak said to Bubbles, but why didn't you scratch him? You're a cat. Why didn't you bite him? You're a cat. And Bubbles said, I was too scared. Well, that actually made Squeak very, very, very angry. And he said, just a minute. He said, I've got an idea. Come inside my mouse hole. And so the next thing is, Bubbles squeezed through Squeak's mouse hole. And Squeak brought out a mirror and said, look at yourself in the mirror. Look, you're a lovely cat. You've got everything to be proud of and everything to be brave for. Bubbles looked at himself in the mirror and said, look, can you see why I'm so scared? I'm just a small, scrawny, little helpless cat. Suddenly, Squeak had an idea. Ding! I've got an idea, he thought. Twitching his whiskers. Tell you what, Bubbles, he said. This isn't any ordinary mirror. This is a magic mirror. I don't believe you, said Bubbles. Have a look in the mirror and stare at it carefully, and you can be whatever you want to be if you only have confidence in yourself. Bubbles looked at himself in the mirror, and he stared at his eyes, and he stared. He looked back to Squeak. Nothing happening. Believe in yourself, said Squeak. Believe in yourself. Have confidence. And Bubbles stared and stared and stared. Suddenly, the room went a different colour. Bing! And Bubbles stared at himself in the mirror. And Squeak thought, this isn't working. He's never going to believe me. But children, watch the mirror carefully. As Bubbles stared at himself and thought what he really wanted to be and what he wanted to become, watch what happened. He stared and stared and stared. Yes, suddenly he looked into the mirror and he saw a lion. Squeak! Squeak! Said Bubbles. It's working! It's working! I'm as strong as a lion! I'm as confident as a lion! I can do anything! Well, Squeak rubbed his little paws together, laughing, thinking, silly cat, he really thinks it's a magic mirror, but as long as it works. So I'll go along with the trick. Well done, Bubbles, you see. Now you're a lion. Now off you go and be confident. Well, children, that's exactly what happened. Bubbles went out into the field and he stood by a crossroads looking and looking, and he thought, if I see that dog again, and he felt so angry and determined to get that collar and bell back. He looked around and he heard the familiar sound. There he is. And as Bubbles looked round, he saw the dog again. Bubbles looked at the dog, drew himself to his full height and said, "Now you listen to me. You give me back my collar and bell." Said the dog. "What are you going to do?" Little scared Bubbles. Well, Bubbles was a bit scared, but he thought very, very carefully about that image of himself looking at the mirror, and he felt as strong as a lion. He felt as confident as a lion. Now, children, careful. Here comes a scary bit. Better cover your eyes. Bubbles drew himself to his full height, and suddenly he thought, 1, 2, 3. "Oh my goodness," said the dog. "What the heck's happened to you? Oh my goodness." And he took his collar and bell off and threw it all the way over to Bubbles, and it landed on Bubbles' neck. Bubbles was still going and roaring like a lion. And the dog thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm not going to stay any longer. Bye. Wah!" And he ran away, never to be seen again. Well, the next thing you know, Bubbles went back to Squeak's mouse hole. And Bubbles said, "Squeak, it worked, it worked, it worked. Let me come in and see the magic mirror again." Well, Squeak didn't know what to say, but he said, "Come on then, you'd better come in." They went inside Squeak's mouse hole, and Bubbles looked at the mirror again. And Squeak felt bad for having told Bubbles a lie, and he said, "Bubbles, I've got to tell you, it's not really a magic mirror at all. It was only pretend. I only did it to give you confidence in yourself." "No, no, no," said Bubbles. "I really did see a lion, and I really felt like a lion, and I really felt as strong and as confident as a lion. Look." Well, Squeak looked at the mirror, and all he could see was the reflection of the little cat Bubbles. But the more Bubbles stared into the mirror, the darker it became, and eventually he saw the picture again of himself as a big, strong lion. "Thank you so much, Squeak," said Bubbles. "I'm going to be off now, but can we be friends?" Squeak said, "Yes, of course," peering at the mirror again, but only seeing the cat. "Of course you can, and of course we can, and of course I will," said Squeak. "But you don't really want to believe that tale about the mirror?" Bubbles said, "You don't have to try and trick me, Squeak, because every time I look into the mirror, I see that lion again, and it makes me feel so good." And Squeak said, "Well, just remember, you can be whatever you want to be. You can become what you want to become. Just only have confidence and stand up for yourself." "Thank you," said Bubbles. "Thank you very much." And they both stepped outside the mouse hole with the mirror. "Okay, I'll be off," said Bubbles, "but we'll be friends forever, true?" "True," said Squeak. Bubbles said, "I've got to go back now. It's lunchtime. See you tomorrow. Bye." And Squeak said bye, and with that, Bubbles disappeared and ran off. Well, Squeak started chuckling into himself. Oh, poor Bubbles, actually swallowing the tail of the mirror and all that stuff. He said to himself, "But of course, if it made him feel better, that's great. I better put the magic mirror," not really my mirror, "back in the mouse hole." And as he took it, he looked inside the mirror and said to himself, "Mind you, I wish it was a magic mirror, because if truth be told, I'm just a quiet, timid, frightened little mouse, and everything and everyone frightens me too. Oh," he said, "I wish it was a magic mirror, and I wish if I looked into it, I could become a mighty mouse too. Oh well. And children, here comes a scary bit. As he took the mirror, he grasped it with both paws and stared at it just for a few moments. And suddenly, to his amazement and his shock, as he looked in the mirror, this is what happened. And this is what he saw. "Oh! Oh! Oh!" said Squeak. "That's odd." And that, children, is the end of our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Give a big cheer if you did. Oh, that's grand. And now would you like to hear another one? Okay, then blow Zeta away back to Storyland and I'll think of more stories for you and we can play again together. But before I go, I want you just to think carefully, what are the messages we can learn from today's story? Did you learn anything at all? Do you have something you could say about it? I hope you do. Let me know. In the meantime, you blow me back to Storyland and I'll blow you away too. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Goodbye. Bye.